Thank you so much. What a pleasure. A long time ago, in January of 1963, my family moved mid-year and I was transferred into a new third grade class. I became a political activist that year. The teacher, Mrs. Bua, was large, imposing, and very strict. On my first day in her class, after the Pledge of Allegiance, the students bowed their heads and they began, "Our Father who art in heaven," and I had no idea what they were saying. I had never heard the Lord's Prayer in my Jewish home. And after they were finished, Mrs. Buick called me up to her desk and asked me in an angry voice why I hadn't prayed. I told her, I don't know it. So she wrote down the words, told me I was to memorize it that night, and that I was to recite it each morning.
Hi, we're no longer live, so you can make as much noise.
Okay, if you would all, Sherry, please put everyone else but me on mute. Thanks. I was in good girl hell, not wanting to displease my teacher, but also knowing that my parents would not want me to say this Christian prayer. I created for myself my own good girl compromise. I memorized enough of the words so that I could mouth them silently, but I didn't actually say them out loud. I've never forgotten the day that spring when Miss Buick came in and said angrily to the class, "The Supreme Court ruled yesterday that teachers aren't allowed to make students pray. And I don't agree with that. We're going to say the Lord's Prayer anyway. But I can't make you anymore." And much to her displeasure, I never mouthed it again. I didn't know then what the Supreme Court was. And for sure, I didn't know that the Supreme Court case, Abington versus Schempp, was actually brought by a Unitarian Universalist, Edward Schempp, who had filed suit against the school district to stop them from requiring his children to read the Bible in school. I'm pretty sure I didn't know what a Unitarian was either at that time. But even at 8, I knew it was wrong in America to require children to say prayers from a different religion. See, I believed the words of the Pledge of Allegiance that I had learned in kindergarten. One nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For all. I still believe that. So on this Veterans Day, what I'm going to do today is to invite you to reclaim the word patriotic, a word many of us conceded to conservatives on the religious right decades ago. The January 6th assault on the US Capitol demonstrated the hollowness of their claims to patriotism. Yet even this very past week, the voters who supported the Republicans in my state of Virginia were described by the New York Times as more patriotic than those who voted for the Progressive Democrat, and with no explanation provided about why were they more democratic? What did they do that we didn't? You may have heard this poem by an African-American poet, Langston Hughes. He wrote it nearly a century ago. Let America be America again. Let it be the dream it used to be. Let it be the pioneer on the plain seeking a home where he himself is free. America never was America to me. Let America be the dream the dreamers dreamed. Let it be that great land of love where never kings connive nor tyrants scheme that any man be crushed by another. It never was America to me. Oh, let my land be a land where liberty is crowned with no false patriotic wreath, but opportunity is real and life is free. Equality is in the air we breathe. See, I think Langston Hughes, he was a patriot. I turned 18 the year the vote was given to 18-year-olds, and I couldn't wait to vote for George McGovern. I'm guessing that's true of some of you as well. I still love voting, and I don't think I've ever missed an election, even the local ones. Election night is kind of my Super Bowl. I stayed up way too late this past Tuesday night watching election results. And I cheered as people of color were elected for the first time as mayors in Boston, Pittsburgh, Kansas City, Cincinnati. And did you know that Dearborn, Michigan elected an Arab American Muslim as their mayor? And yes, I despair about the results in my home state of Virginia. Voting is at the core of American democracy. It's also our fifth Unitarian Universalist principle. As President Lyndon Johnson said in 1965 when he signed the Voting Rights Act, the vote is the most powerful instrument ever devised by man for breaking down injustice. So I'm appalled, and I'm guessing you are, by these so-called patriots who are working to suppress voting rights in the United States. In the last few months, Senate Republicans refused to debate the Freedom to Vote Act, and all but one refused debate on the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Since this past January, at least 18 states have enacted 30 laws restricting access to the vote. These laws are making mail voting and early voting more difficult. They impose harsher voter ID requirements, and they're making faulty voter purges more likely. For example, did you know that in 23 states, you can't vote unless you have an ID with your name and street address on it? That 30 states do not allow for same day or late registration? 33 states don't allow people of a history of having committed a felony to vote, no matter how much time they have served. 7 states don't allow students to vote unless they've gotten an in-state ID for that college. And then, of course, there's gerrymandering, foreign interference in our election, and other attempts to keep people from the polls. I'm also, and I'm guessing some of you are, very worried about the new Supreme Court majority. Just this past week, the Supreme Court held an emergency hearing on the Texas law that bans abortion at 4 weeks of gestation, and they then heard a gun rights case from New York. There are several other crucial cases this year that go to the heart of our very freedoms. I have great concerns about how a right-wing dominated SCOTUS is going to decide these cases, and I am very worried that the constitutional right to abortion is about to be overturned. And so as I was perseverating on all this week, I remembered and looked up this quote by political scientist Howard Zinn from about 15 years ago. Zinn wrote, "It would be naive to depend on the Supreme Court to defend the rights of poor people, women, people of color, dissenters of all kinds. Those rights only come alive when citizens organize, protest, demonstrate, strike, boycott, rebel, and violate the law to uphold justice." He continued, quote, "The rights of working people, of women, of Black people have not depended on the decisions of the court. Like the other branches of the political system, the courts have recognized these rights only after citizens have engaged in direct action, powerful enough to win these rights for themselves." And my friends, that's where we come in. Sikh activist Valerie Lasore, the head of Love's Army, wrote that this is the time to give birth to a new America. She reminded us that during labor, we need to do 2 things. We need to breathe and we need to push. To quote her, "Breathe in order to remember all that is good and beautiful and worth fighting for, and then decide how you will push." So this is how I think we need to push. We, people like us, we must reclaim America and patriotism from those on the right, including or maybe especially the violent January insurrectionists from those who claim to own them. We need to say boldly and proudly it is patriotic to say no to sexism, no to racism, no to xenophobia, no to homophobia, no to transphobia. It is patriotic to say yes to equality, yes to the environment, yes to women, yes to people of color, yes to religious freedom, yes to reproductive justice, to LGBTQ people, to immigrants, to gun control, and I'm sure you have your own lists. We want that yes, not just as social progressives, but because we are people of faith who deeply believe that everyone is created in the divine image and that we are called to stand with the most marginalized and the most vulnerable until there is really liberty and justice for all. Let us remember that the history of Unitarian Universalists in the United States is one of resistance and working for justice. Our people wrote the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. We led or co-led the fight for abolition, for voting rights for women, for workers' rights. We were the largest number of white clergy in Selma for Dr. King, and we drove people to work during the Montgomery bus boycott. The Supreme Court case that gave us abortion rights began in our church in Dallas, Texas. And the very first legal same-sex marriage in America took place on the steps of our headquarters in Boston. We, for centuries, have been the ones we are waiting for, and we must be now. So I ask you, think about what you can concretely begin to do for a just future now. And I know some of you have been doing this for decades, and I know we are getting old and we still have to work. We need to escort at family planning clinics and abortion clinics. We can volunteer at one of our schools and get involved when school boards have hearings on classroom content. We can become mentors. Show up at Black Lives Matter rallies or police reform events. Educate yourself about your privilege and about the needs of others. Get involved. Please get involved with this church's social justice team. Attend an event or volunteer. Donate your money. There is so much we can each do. And yes, I know it can feel overwhelming, and we have no choice. I leave you today with these words by 20th century theologian Reinhold Niebuhr that I love. Nothing that is worth doing can be achieved in our lifetime. Therefore, we must be saved by hope. Nothing which is true or beautiful or good makes sense in any immediate context of history. Therefore, we must be saved by faith. Nothing we do, however virtuous, can be accomplished alone. Therefore, we will be saved by love. Hope, faith, and love. May we find them today, here, now, and with each other. May we pass them on in our hurting world. My country, 'tis of thee. Let freedom ring. Let freedom ring.